Hello everyone. Today I want to talk about Spy, and specifically Spy's watches. So I am actually starting the demo midway through, because I did play some Spy on this map, quite a bit actually. In no small part because I was kind of in a silly mood, and also I was just dying to scouts a lot, so there was some factor of just like, okay. When I like die in a really stupid way or something, I sometimes want to go Spy just to like punish the other team, I guess, or like do something to make them mad. I don't know, it's weird. But it happens towards the end, so I'm gonna, start the demo a bit later just so we guarantee get to that. But I want to talk about Spy's watches and talk about when they're good, when they're not, and which ones to use. So, for a starter, brief introduction on where you see Spy, where Spy gets played, and where it succeeds. Generally speaking, Spy is a good class to use in even Uber's stalemates, or in disad transitions. Those are kind of the general two. You want the Spy to either break a stalemate and give you an advantage when things are even, or to neutralize a disadvantage by stabbing a med or something as the other team is pushing, or about to push, or have advantage, Uber advantage in some form or another, right? Those are the general two that you'll see, and the actual mechanics behind this, or how it actually looks when these happen, is in even Ubers, you spawn a Spy after sacking or something like that, bring them into position for a stab on the medic or some valuable target or whatnot. Spy's really just looking for usually a trade with a more valuable target. Although I suppose you can sap and sack into last, which is another strat that we're not really going to talk about here. But anyway, yeah, spawn up Spy, get into position. You definitely want to pressure, because if you go too long without anything happening and without you pressuring for your sack, then the other team's really going to start to suspect that you might have a Spy. Which is a problem. You can play Spy in even Uber's stalemates defensively, although it's a little risky because the other team, again, is the ones who can pressure into you. Whatever team has control of mid, it's usually on them to pressure. And you don't want to be effectively down a player when they're pressuring, because you're on Spy. So there's a risk factor to it, but it can totally work and can actually be pretty unexpected. But anyway, those are the main situations that you see Spy. And as an aside as well, like, people talk and sometimes complain even about how only these, 4 classes get used in 6s or whatever, which just wholly is not the case. They're the only ones that get used at a full-time capacity. Yes, that's true. But every class gets used when they're good, and different classes have different strengths, of course. So Spy, who many people consider the weakest class in the game, still gets used regularly in competitive play, but it's just when it's helpful and when it's actually good, rather than just trying to use it full time, which ironically enough, actually, if you try to force Spy in timings that he doesn't really work, not only are you going to be generally unsuccessful, because it's a class that can very easily falter if you're playing it in those situations, and trying to force it to be successful in situations where it just can't be, or is unlikely to be. But also, you're making it so the situations that that it would otherwise be successful in are suddenly unsuccessful, because when it would have been good, you've played it so much that they suddenly are just on full Spy alert. Which actually happens in this half. I play I think 3 or 4 Spy lives in a row, and they absolutely start to expect the Spy. But anyway, that's just a brief aside. So I mentioned timing and timings. This is quintessential to being successful on Spy. It's all about timing. If you have a good timing for Spy, then that's when the pieces kind of fall into place, or that's the baseline foundation of what you need to be successful. You can have a bad timing and just completely diff someone with a trick stab or something like that, and that makes for a very funny clip, and it can be very exciting, but that's not a reliable way to play the class. And even in those times when someone gets discovered, unfortunately, and is just able to diff the other player, they still would have preferred to have been unseen, right? And they may have gotten more value if they were unseen, rather than just trading out with a soldier when they should have instead been dead to rights. So generally speaking, you want to play Spy in these timings where it can work, when the other team's not going to expect it, meaning you can maybe get into position fast enough, stuff like that, and actually have a successful play. So in the case of the disad transition that I talked about, if, you know, the other team's about to push and you are in position as a spy, you know, ready around the corner of the choke or something, decloaking as they're getting through and going for the stab on the med, something like that. Very just bare bones. Super vague example. But in position as they're getting through and stabbing the med or the demo or some important pick as they're getting through. That's heavily dependent on whether you can get into that position on time. And that is heavily dependent on your timing, your spy timing. Because you aren't just on the class on demand. You have to spawn at some point on it. Unless you're running it full time, which again kind of cannibalizes your timings and, you know, the success on the class in general when you're running it full time, as I already mentioned before. So you need to understand not only the pace of the game, but the game state, such that you can realize if you're spawning, whether you have a timing in which you can get into position and be successful in the class to begin with. So Spy really is all about identifying those timings, and if you can find a good spy timing, then a lot of the time the pieces do just, again, like kind of fall into place. There's execution still, and you still have to be intelligent about the class, but it can work quite well. So when I talk about the different watches and what they do, I'm going to talk about them in terms of timing and how they enable spy timings, right? Because that is what is important. So we can just start with the Dead Ringer. I've already talked about the Dead Ringer, I'm pretty sure. It's bad in competitive play for a couple of reasons. So first is people have eyes. And what I mean by this is that teams like to spot. And spotting is a really important facet of every single hold and push. It's a really big deal if a player gets behind. It's a disadvantage to have as a team if another player is behind usually, unless you have such a big advantage that you're happy to keep pushing forward. And like, for example, you know, a soldier's behind. This is way too specific of an example for the point I'm making, but we can imagine on Snakewater, you get a force into last, the other team still tries to countersack, and the soldier countersacks by going behind cheese into saw. That's not a problem for you because now there's one fewer soldier on last, you get to push in. But most of the time, a player behind is a disadvantage. Having someone behind you is a disadvantage, but having someone behind you without you knowing about it is a massive disadvantage. So you very much don't want that to happen. Scouts are fast, soldiers are fast. So you spot, you see all the doors from whatever positioning your hold is, so that you know if people are behind. So if you're a spy who can't cloak on demand, then you are going to be spotted. I guess the most successful way to run Cloak and Dead Ringer. Oh, the class is coming out. I guess the most successful way to run Dead Ringer would be to disguise as a friendly and end up dying. Oh, this is embarrassing. End up faking a friendly death just so it's not immediately obvious that you're on spy. But that brings us to the second point, which is people have ears. So good luck decloaking with that thing without getting heard. Generally speaking, it just does not enable your timings anymore. If anything, it restricts you. Oh, we're running it right back. So yeah. What else? As far as, oh yeah. So people do use Dead Ringer, don't get me wrong, but it's completely accidental because people spawn up on spy, they commit out of the forward spawn, and then they realize, oh wait, I'm on the wrong watch. I'm on like the pub loadout, which happens. And people can be successful despite that. But yeah, it's definitely not the watch people want to use. So yeah, there's that. Next, let's move on to the Cloak and Dagger, which is generally the preferred watch, or was the preferred watch. I don't know if it still is at this point. And the Cloak and Dagger, on the surface, seems like it enables more timings. And why is that? Well, it allows you to stay cloaked indefinitely, which is really important. Oh, third life in a row. Being able to stay, and they're 100% going to expect me on spy after I ran it back twice in a row. So being able to stay cloaked indefinitely is a really nice advantage. Man, that was just unlucky. I don't know what that scout's even trying to go to catwalk for. Whatever. Being able to stay cloaked indefinitely on the cloak and dagger is really important. Oh, I keep saying important. It's helpful. It lets you decloak exactly when you want to and no sooner and no later. Versus on the stock watch that I'm on now, you could see that I actually got stuck decloaking on mid when people were fighting me, which is not good. That can get you killed. So being able to choose exactly when you want to decloak, in theory, gives you more timings to choose from. Now, in practice, that's not the case. Because while, yes, the cloak and dagger lets you stay invisible longer than stock if you aren't moving, if you have to move, then stock lets you stay cloaked longer. And as a spy, you almost always have to move. You have to get into a position, whether you're trying to sack in an even uber situation, whether you're trying to even get in position to sap a gun for a sap and sack, or whether you're trying to get to a position for like a disad transition and catch people in a doorway when they're unaware, stuff like that. You need to move. And the stock watch actually enables way better traversal of the map while cloaked than the cloak and dagger does, which is a big deal. And on top of that, it's compounded by the fact that the stock watch actually lets you pick up ammo while cloaked, which again is going to let you traverse even faster than you would otherwise. This is somewhat map dependent, whether there's even ammo available, and you have to be careful about picking up ammo, because if you pick it up in front of someone, then they're just going to know immediately. And even if you pick it up and someone discovers that the ammo is missing, they can ask if anyone took it on their team. And if no one did, then you know there's likely a spy. But anyway, this is actually a disad transition spy timing, as you can see. So they are very much paranoid. But this is a decent timing. And actually, this is a great example because, yes, you can see that I'm running out of cloak there. Yes, you can see that I am shoehorned into going for a stab at that moment. But what's not being seen is the fact that stock is the only one. Oh, man, I would have stabbed one of them if I recloaked. But I actually, gave away that I was on point by blocking their cap. That was an unfortunate mistake. But you can see how, well, what's hard to see is that I only got into that position because I could traverse fast enough because I was on stock. So in my opinion, stock as the kind of default cloak actually enables you to have more timings because you can get into position faster, way faster than you do on cloak and dagger. And cloak and dagger is a more niche option reserved for those situations in which you really want to play the long con, which a lot of the time is not recommended, especially like if your team is not doing anything, then it's really not recommended. But cloak and dagger is better than stock if you're really playing that long con, or you just don't have to traverse that much. Whether it's a point that you really only need to cloak for a brief moment to get into position, because there just aren't long sight lines or something like that, or you're getting like a forward spawn in a disad transition and you're already pretty close to the door that you expect the other team to push, stuff like that. It can absolutely succeed. But by and large, by getting into position faster, you are traversing much better on stock and giving yourself much more access to better timings on stock. On top of the fact that those earlier timings are generally better. Again, same situation as like the longer you are on spy, the more likely it is that you're going to be found out or expected. Same deal or even worse if your team's not doing too much. But also your team can pressure in a much more comfortable timing window if you're in position faster. Plus, all those like disad transition stuff that I talked about, you even saw a living example of like, I'm only able to even get in this position because of stock, meaning this timing that I have on spy is a strictly stock timing, actually. I was watching a game the other day where it was an even Ubers stalemate on Sunshine mid, a mid to second stalemate. And the team sacked. I think it was their soldier came up spy, and they were in cloak and dagger. They walked Valley. They cloaked through Valley and actually couldn't even make it through the entirety of Valley with the amount of cloak they had. So they were stuck just crouching in a corner Valley for a few seconds to get some cloak and then crab walking their way up to point. This whole time, another big failure of the team was the fact that they weren't pressuring. So the other team immediately started expecting this spy. I don't know if there was even much spy being played earlier in that half or not. But anyway, they immediately start expecting the spy. They start looking around. Another failure was the spy's like crouching in the one corner that you're probably going to get cleared in. But whatever, at this point, like the play is already just boomed, right? Because you are so slow, your team didn't do anything. And the other team is just on full spy alert with nothing else to do. And they end up actually spamming out the spy, spotting it, and killing the spy before he ever even got to decloak. And this to me is like a perfect microcosm of where the Cloak and Dagger fails in a competitive setting, which is the fact that you just, you have the perfect timing in the, you know, most theoretical sense of you get to choose exactly when to decloak. And don't get me wrong, there's going to be times where playing Stockwatch, you just get killed because you run out of cloak. That happens on occasion. However, even though it's this theoretical perfect timing or whatever, in practice, there's a lot more going on, and in practice, you actually get access to more times if you're able to traverse the map faster and get into a good position faster, basically, is how I would summarize things. Any final notes here? Final notes? I don't think so. I think that's probably all I have to talk about. Cloak and Dagger still has its uses, don't get me wrong, but I think it's a lot more niche than most people give it credit for. I think that the Stockwatch is really a good default because, again, it gives you access to more of those earlier timings. Also, I should mention that Spy is not a class you want to be on long term, and in some cases, Spy, you know, after getting a stab will, like a useful stab, like on the Met or something, will not even try to escape and will just try to get another kill and likely die because they want to get back on Soldier or want to get back on Scout. So they're on a class that can actually help their team push, right? Stuff like that. So not only do you want access to those earlier timings, not only are those earlier timings better, but also you just don't want to be stuck on Spy that long because it's a very niche class that only has these niche applications, and you want to be using the class for that and not like stuck on it or whatever. But I think that's all I have to talk about as far as the watch selection. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you all next time.